Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Today we're going to present about court case study which is Tung, Yoke, Leng versus Maxis, Broadband, Sendian Berhad.
Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. So my name is Indra Islam bin Muhammad Kini. I will present the introduction of our industry court case report. The case I was selected is Tung, Yoke, Leng versus Maxis, Broadband, SDM HD, which was decided by the Industrial Court of Malaysia in Award No. 94 of 2025. This case involved an unfair dismissal where the employee claimed that her termination was without just cause and excuse. The dispute mainly revolved around the implementation of a performance improvement plan or PIP under Section 23 of the Industrial Regulation Act 1967. So the objective of the study to determine the background and fact of the dispute between the claim and the employer. Next, we analyze whether this result was carried out with just cause or excuse according to Malaysian industry law. We also evaluate whether the performance improvement plan was implemented fairly by providing sufficient warning, guidance and opportunity for improvement. Lastly, the study aims to understand the reason behind the industrial court final decision. So the scope of the study consists of two parts. First is the contextual and case-specific scope, which focus on the dispute between Tung, Yoke, Leng and Maxis Broadband SDMHD. We examine the event that led to the claimant dismissal, the argument presented by both parties and the findings of the industrial court. The second part is the conceptual and theoretical scope. This study applies important industrial relation concepts such as just cause or excuse, performance management, the performance improvement plan or PIP, procedural fairness and the employer burden of proof. These concepts are used to evaluate whether the dismissal was legally and fairly to be conducted.
Well, let's continue to the case background and context. Organization background. Maxis Broadband SDMHD is one of the Malaysia's leading telecommunication companies. The company has a strong corporate governance system and an internal audit division that manages and monitors operations. Employee performance is measured using key performance indicators or KPI, which are reviewed regularly to maintain high performance standard. Maxis introduced performance improvement plan or PIP policy. Under this policy, employees who receive poor performance ratings for 2 consecutive years will be placed under PIP, and failure to improve may lead to a termination of employment. Moving on to the nature of conflict. The conflict in this case began when the claimant's employment was terminated due to poor performance. The claimant argued that the dismissal was unfair because during the fourth PIP review, she achieved a rating of meet all PIP goals. Therefore, she believed that she should not have been dismissed. However, the company had a different view. Maxis argued that her overall performance from 2017 until 2020 was unsatisfactory, and that one positive review will not erase her previous failures. Another issue was no billing of KPIs, where unfinished tasks were added to a new task, increasing her workload. This disagreement eventually became a legal dispute over fairness and management decisions. Let's continue to the parties involved. There were several parties involved in this case. The primary parties were the claimant, Tung, Yoke, Leng, who had worked with the company for more than 25 years, and they responded, Maxis Broadband SDMHD. The secondary parties included the lawyers, HR representatives, supervisors, and company witnesses who provided evidence during the court proceedings. The industrial court chairman, Y.A. Puan Vanitamani Sivalingam, was responsible for hearing the case and delivering the final judgment. In addition, the Director General of Industrial Relations played an important role by referring the unresolved dispute to the industrial court. Next, position and underlying interests of the parties. The claimant and the company had completely different positions regarding this case. The claimant believed that her dismissal was illegal and unfair because she had successfully met all the goals during the final PIP review. She also argued that the heavy workload and inexperienced support staff affected her performance. Her main interests were to protect her professional reputation and receive compensation for wrongful dismissal. On the other hand, Maxis believed that the termination was justified because the claimant had consistently failed to meet performance expectations over several years. The company's main interests were to maintain high performance standards, improve efficiency, and protect its managerial authority. Well, for the last part of the case background context, timeline of the events. To summarize the timeline, the claimant joined Maxis in 1996 and was later promoted to head of commercial audit from 2017, and 2022 she repeatedly failed to achieve several KPIs and was placed under the performance improvement plan. In March 2021, although she met all PIP goals during the fourth review, her employment was terminated in September 2021. Finally, in January 2025, the industrial court ruled that the dismissal was without a valid ground and ordered compensation to be paid to the claimant.
My name is Najm Alif. I will be present with my part, which is critical analysis of conflict management. For the first one is 3.3 for section 3.3. The main conflict management strategy used by the company was the performance improvement plan, or we call it PIP. The employee was placed under the PIP after receiving low performance rating for 2 consecutive years. During the PIP period, management set a clear KPIs, conducted monthly performance review, issued warning letters, and claimed provided coaching and additional manpower to support employee. However, the PIP process, the company decided to terminate the employee employment. For the next part, the strategy has both strengths and weaknesses. The strength were the PIP gave the employee an opportunity to improve, while the use of KPIs, regular evaluation, allowed management to monitor performance systematically. However, there are several weaknesses. The industrial court found that PIP lack of transparency, and there was insufficient evidence that coaching was effectively carried out. The additional staff assigned to help the employee were also inexperienced, which increased his workload. Most importantly, although the employee achieved the final PIP goal, the company will still proceed with the dismissal, making the PIP appear to be a tool to justify termination rather than the employee development. Overall, although the company's strategy was appropriate in theory, its implementation was ineffective. The company failed to ensure that procedural fairness and meaningful employee support, which caused the conflict to escalate and resulted in the industrial court ruling that dismissal was without just causes or excuse.
Okay, hi, Assalamualaikum Doctor. My name is Muhammad Zaidan. So I would like to continue the presentation about critical analysis of conflict. So for the evaluation of the approach, Maxis used a performance improvement plan, which is PIP, to manage the employee's performance. However, the approach was not fully effective because it lacked of fairness, transparency, and also a proper coaching. The employee repeatedly raised concerns about exercise, workload, and insufficient support, but these issues were not adequately addressed. In addition, the company failed to document the coaching and assistance required under its own PIP policy. Although the employee successfully completed all the PIP objectives, but she was still terminated without a clear explanation. According to Aguinis 2019 and Dennis C. and Murphy 2017, performance management should focus on employee development through continuous feedback and support rather than being used mainly as a tool to justify dismissal. Therefore, Maxis' approach did not reflect HR best practices. Was it the ideal approach? Okay, Maxis' approach was not the ideal way to manage the conflict. Although the employee was placed on a revised performance improvement plan, the company failed to provide sufficient coaching, documentation support, and also a clear communication about the consequences of the PIP. The employee's concerns regarding excessive workload, inaccurate performance records, and inadequate support staff were also not properly investigated. Research by Polakos and colleagues shows that continuous coaching and constructive feedback are essential for improving employee performance. In this case, the PIP focused more on following procedures that supporting employee development, making it an effective conflict management approach. Did it escalate or de-escalate the conflict? Instead of resolving the conflict, the company's action caused it to escalate. Management relied on strict performance evaluation and disciplinary measures while failing to address the employee's concern about workload, unfinished tasks, and also limited resources. As a result, the employee lost confidence in the fairness of the PIP process. Even after meeting all the PIP objectives, she was dismissed, which eventually led to the industrial court case. According to Colquitt and colleague, fair organizational procedures increase employee trust and also acceptance of management decisions. In this case, the lack of procedural fairness intensified the conflict rather than resolving it. Analysis based on the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument (TKI). Based on the Thomas-Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument, Maxis demonstrated a competing conflict management style. This approach emphasized archiving organizational goals while giving a little attention to the employees' concerns. In this case, management focused on enforcing the performance improvement plan and eventually terminated the employee, despite her repeated complaints about excessive workload, limited resources, and also unrealistic expectations. A more effective approach would have been the collaborating style, where both management and the employee work together to identify the root causes of the performance issue and develop fair solutions. For example, the company could have adjusted unrealistic KPIs, provided experienced support staff, documented coaching session, and also extend the improvement period. This approach would better balance organizational performance with employee well-being. Ethical responsibility of the HR manager. The HR manager has an ethical responsibility to ensure that the performance improvement plan is implemented fairly, transparently, and also consistently. In this case, HR should have clearly explained the purpose of the enhanced PIP, the expected performance standard, and the possible outcomes. HR also needed to document all coaching session, feedback, and performance discussion, as well as investigate the employees' concerns regarding excessive workload, inaccurate performance record, and inadequate support. Rather than treating the PIP as a process leading to dismissal, HR should have focused on helping the employee improve. According to the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, ethical HR practice promotes fairness, transparency, employee well-being, and evidence-based decision-making. Applying this principle could have prevented the dispute from escalating to the industrial court. If we were the HR manager, we would focus on resolving the performance issues through employee development rather than immediate dismissal. First, we'll investigate the root causes of the performance problems by discussing the issues with the employee, supervisor, and also the HR team. We would also assess the employee's concerns about workload and lack of support before making any decisions. Next, revise the performance improvement plan by setting realistic goals, providing weekly coaching sessions, documenting feedback, and assigning an experienced mentor. Since the employee successfully achieved all the PIP objectives, we would continue monitoring her performance instead of terminating her immediately. Termination would only be considered if there was clear evidence that the employee failed to improve despite receiving adequate coaching, resource, and also fair opportunities. This approach promotes fairness, reduces legal risk, and strengthens employee trust in the organization.
Next, reflecting on the industrial court case of Tung, Leng, and Maxis Broadband, let's look at our proposed alternative HR strategies and improvements. First, HR must pivot to a developmental-based PIP driven by growth rather than punishment. We propose collaborative conflict resolution by the TKI framework, strategic mentorship, and establishing a fair system of workload evaluation prior to any performance tracking. To bridge these strategies into actionable corporate practices, we recommend 5 key pillars. First, full PIP documentation, which is legally safeguarding every coaching session and evaluation. Second, smart performance goals, which is setting realistic, time-bound, and unambiguous targets. Third, competent support staff, which is providing experienced team resource so senior managers are not bogged down retraining raw recruits. And the fourth, two-way communication, which is ensuring an open dialogue where employee voice concern without fear of reprisal. And the last one is termination as a last resort, which is protecting organizational trust, especially when an employee successfully meets their set goals. By executing this improvement, our expected outcomes are clear: higher employee performance and motivation, a strongly aligned positive work culture, and a massive reduction in corporate legal risk through fair, transparent practices.
So for the next part is key finding summary. Based on this case, the main conflict happened because the performance improvement plan of our PIP was not implemented fairly. Instead of helping the employee improve, the process appeared to focus more on terminations. Several weaknesses were identified, including incomplete documentation, lack of coaching, excessive workload, and insufficient support throughout the PIP period. Although the employee successfully met the final PIP target, the company still terminated her employment. Therefore, the industrial court decided that the dismissal was without just cause or excuse. This case highlights that effective performance management must include procedural fairness, clear communication, continuous support, and ethical HR practices. For the final summary, this case demonstrates that employee performance management should always be fair, transparent, and supported by strong evidence. Organizations have the right to assess employee performance, but every decision must comply with company policies and employment law. Human resource also plays an important role by ensuring proper documentations, providing continuous coaching and feedback, and giving employees a reasonable opportunity to improve. Overall, this case remains used that performance management should not focus only on achieving KPI or disciplinary action. Instead, it should emphasize employee development, effective communication, and fairness, which ultimately lead to better organizational performance and strong employment relationship.